Why won't you date me? The question floated across the glittering ballroom with such quiet sincerity that every conversation seemed to dissolve into silence. Crystal chandeliers cast warm reflections across polished marble floors while executives, investors, and reporters turned their eyes toward the same unlikely pair standing beneath the golden lights. Victoria Hayes, the billionaire CEO whose name appeared on magazine covers and financial headlines almost every week, wasn't smiling for the cameras anymore. For the first time in years, she looked nervous. Across from her stood Ethan Brooks, a widowed single father wearing a simple navy suit that had clearly been tailored years earlier and carefully preserved. His tie was straight, his shoes were polished, but nothing about him suggested he belonged among private jets, billion-dollar mergers, or the country's wealthiest business leaders. Yet somehow, every eye in the room rested on him instead of the woman who owned the company hosting the gala. Victoria searched his face with quiet hope. "I've asked myself this every day for months," she whispered softly enough that only those closest could hear. "Is it because I'm too busy, too rich, too difficult to understand?" Ethan lowered his eyes for a brief moment. His expression carried neither pride nor embarrassment, only a sadness that seemed far older than the elegant evening surrounding them. The orchestra had stopped between songs, leaving only the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant clink of glasses somewhere near the ballroom entrance. Outside the towering windows, Manhattan shimmered beneath the spring night, thousands of lights glowing like distant stars. Inside, no one dared interrupt the silence. Ethan finally looked back at Victoria, his voice calm enough to almost disappear into the room. "Because if I ever give someone my heart again," he said gently, "she has to understand that it stopped belonging only to me the day my daughter was born." Victoria blinked, unable to hide the heartbreak filling her eyes. She had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without hesitation. She had outmaneuvered competitors twice her age before turning 35. She had built an empire from almost nothing. But no boardroom victory had prepared her for a man whose greatest treasure wasn't something money could ever purchase. Around them, whispers faded before they could fully form. Reporters slowly lowered their phones. Even the photographers seemed to forget to press their shutters. There was no dramatic argument, no humiliation, no spectacle. Only one quiet answer that somehow carried more weight than every speech delivered that evening. No one in that ballroom knew how many nights Victoria had quietly searched for reasons behind Ethan's distance. No one knew how many times fate had placed them together before this unforgettable moment. And absolutely no one knew that 3 months earlier, the most powerful woman in the room had first met Ethan Brooks in the least extraordinary place imaginable, where a little girl with bright eyes, a forgotten lunchbox, and one simple act of kindness had quietly begun changing two lonely hearts forever. 3 months earlier, the rhythm of Ethan Brooks's life could almost be measured by the quiet routines that held his small family together. Every weekday began before sunrise inside a modest 2-bedroom house on the edge of Maplewood, New Jersey. The coffee maker hummed softly while the smell of toasted bread drifted through the kitchen. 8-year-old Lily hurried downstairs with one sneaker untied and her backpack hanging from only one shoulder. "Daddy, I cannot find my math folder." "Check under the couch." "Already did." Ethan smiled as he reached beneath the dining chair without looking and pulled out the bright blue folder. "Sometimes the things we were looking for simply waiting where we forgot to look." Lily laughed and wrapped her arms around him before racing back upstairs. The morning sunlight slipped through the kitchen window, painting warm lines across the worn wooden table that Ethan had built with his own hands years earlier. There were no expensive decorations, no designer furniture, only photographs filled with genuine smiles and memories that money could never replace. One picture always caught the morning light first. It showed Ethan beside his late wife, both of them holding a newborn Lily between them. Ethan never spoke to the photograph, but every morning he paused for just one heartbeat before picking up his truck keys. Some promises did not need words. His carpentry shop sat 25 minutes away in a quiet industrial district where the scent of fresh cedar and pine filled the air long before customers opened the front door. Ethan specialized in restoring old furniture rather than replacing it. People throw away too many things that still have life left in them, he often told his customers. They usually assumed he was talking about tables and rocking chairs. He rarely corrected them. Late one Thursday afternoon, after finishing the restoration of an antique oak bookshelf, Ethan drove toward Lily's elementary school to pick her up. Spring rain had ended only an hour earlier, leaving the sidewalks shining beneath the afternoon sun. Children spilled through the front entrance laughing. Parents waved from the curb, and crossing guards greeted familiar faces by name. Ethan spotted Lily sitting alone on a nearby bench instead of waiting by the usual pickup line. Beside her sat a woman wearing a simple cream-colored sweater, dark jeans, and white sneakers. She held an open storybook while Lily listened with complete attention, occasionally smiling at the illustrations. There was nothing about the woman that suggested private helicopters, international board meetings, or a personal fortune measured in billions. She looked like any other neighbor waiting for a family member after school. As Ethan approached, Lily looked up and grinned. "Daddy, Miss Victoria reads funny voices." Victoria closed the book and stood with an easy smile that carried none of the confidence she displayed on television interviews. "I hope you do not mind," she said. She was waiting by herself, and we started talking about books. Ethan glanced toward Lily before answering. "Thank you for keeping her company." Their eyes met for only a second, but something unexpectedly quiet settled between them, something untouched by status, appearance, or ambition. Victoria noticed the fine sawdust still resting on the sleeves of his work shirt. Ethan noticed that despite her calm smile, there was a loneliness hidden deep behind her eyes. Neither of them realized that an ordinary conversation outside a neighborhood school would become the first page of a story neither had planned to write. The following Tuesday arrived wrapped in clear blue skies and the gentle warmth of late spring. Ethan was sanding the edge of a handcrafted walnut dining table when the bell above the workshop door chimed softly. He looked up expecting another customer carrying a broken chair or scratch cabinet. Instead, Victoria Hayes stepped inside, holding a small paper bag from the bakery across the street. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said with an easy smile. Ethan set down the sandpaper and brushed the fine wood dust from his hands. "Only if those pastries are not for sharing." She laughed, surprised by his quiet sense of humor. "I was told this town has the best cinnamon rolls in New Jersey. I figured someone should help me verify that." They sat on two unfinished stools near the workbench while sunlight streamed through the tall shop windows, illuminating thousands of tiny particles of sawdust floating peacefully in the air. Victoria looked around at shelves filled with restored furniture, each piece carrying small imperfections that somehow made it more beautiful. "You could probably make much more money building brand new furniture," she observed. Ethan gently ran his hand across the smooth surface of the walnut table. "Maybe, but old things deserve second chances too." His answer lingered between them longer than either expected. Victoria nodded slowly, sensing he was talking about far more than wood. Before leaving, she purchased a small handmade bookshelf, even though she admitted she did not actually need one. Ethan carefully loaded it into the back of her sport utility vehicle and wished her a safe drive. 2 days later, she appeared again, this time at the Saturday farmers market where Lily insisted on choosing fresh strawberries for homemade pancakes. "Miss Victoria," Lily called happily before Ethan even noticed her. Victoria knelt beside the little girl. "Do you think these strawberries are sweet?" "Enough." Lily studied them with complete seriousness before selecting another basket. "These are better. Daddy says you should never judge fruit by the top layer." Victoria smiled. "Your father sounds very wise." Ethan shrugged with quiet embarrassment. "She gives me more credit than I deserve." The conversation drifted naturally from books to gardening, from favorite desserts to small-town festivals. There was no mention of billion-dollar companies or corporate success. Victoria seemed content simply listening as Ethan described building birdhouses with Lily every spring. The following week, another unexpected meeting happened outside the local library. Then another during a school fundraiser, where Victoria quietly bought cookies from Lily's table, without mentioning that the amount she donated could have funded the entire event several times over. Slowly, almost invisibly, she became a familiar face in their ordinary world. People in town assumed she had recently moved nearby. No one recognized one of the wealthiest business leaders in America dressed in jeans, carrying reusable grocery bags, and waiting patiently in line for coffee. Ethan never questioned why their paths continued crossing. He believed coincidence had a funny way of bringing kind people together. Victoria knew better. She had quietly rearranged meetings, postponed flights, and delegated countless responsibilities simply to create room in her calendar for moments that lasted only minutes. Every conversation left her wanting one more. Every goodbye felt slightly too soon. Yet what fascinated her most was not Ethan's quiet confidence or gentle humor. It was the simple truth that he never once asked what she did for a living, never searched her name online, and never treated her as someone extraordinary. In a world where nearly everyone wanted something from Victoria Hayes, Ethan Brooks wanted nothing except to arrive home before dinner so he could help his daughter finish her science project. By the middle of May, Ethan had stopped being surprised whenever Victoria appeared somewhere in town, but he still believed life was simply full of remarkable coincidences. What he did not see were the early morning flights she quietly canceled, the board meetings she attended through video calls from a rented office nearby, or the assistants who wondered why one of the busiest executives in America suddenly insisted on spending so much time in a quiet New Jersey neighborhood. Victoria had spent years mastering billion-dollar negotiations, yet nothing about Ethan Brooks could be understood through numbers or strategy. The harder she tried to explain him, the less sense he made. He never rushed through conversations, never checked his phone while someone was speaking, and never treated kindness like something that deserved recognition. One Saturday afternoon, she visited the annual Spring Family Fair, where children chased balloons between food trucks while local musicians played old country songs beneath colorful tents. Lily was laughing as Ethan helped her throw beanbags toward a stack of painted cans. "You almost got them all, sweetheart." "Almost does not count," Lily replied with a grin. "That sounds exactly like something my grandfather used to say." Victoria laughed as she walked toward them carrying 3 fresh lemonades. Ethan accepted one with a grateful nod. "Thank you. You did not have to do that. I wanted to." They wandered through the fair together, stopping at handmade craft booths and listening to a high school jazz band perform beneath the afternoon sun. At one booth, Lily spotted a small wind chime shaped like butterflies. She admired it quietly before placing it back on the display. Ethan noticed, but continued walking without saying anything. A few minutes later, while Lily chased bubbles with several other children, Victoria returned carrying the wind chime in a simple paper bag. She handed it to Ethan instead of Lily. "Maybe this belongs on your porch." Ethan looked at the delicate glass wings catching the sunlight. "It is beautiful, but I cannot let you keep buying things for us." Victoria answered gently, "It is only a small gift." Ethan smiled with the same quiet warmth she had come to admire. Small gifts become habits. I want Lily to grow up believing that kindness is never measured by price. Victoria lowered her eyes, realizing he had declined the gift without making her feel embarrassed. She quietly returned the wind chime to the booth before Lily ever noticed it. That evening, while driving back to Manhattan, she found herself replaying his words instead of reviewing quarterly reports. She had met presidents, celebrities, and Nobel Prize winners. Yet one carpenter from New Jersey had challenged the way she viewed generosity. A few days later, her chief operating officer looked across the conference table and asked, "Victoria, are you distracted lately?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe I finally met someone who is impossible to impress." The room filled with polite laughter, assuming she was joking. She was not. Meanwhile, Ethan remained completely unaware that financial magazines had started publishing photographs of Victoria attending community events instead of exclusive corporate functions. Reporters speculated about a secret project or political ambition. Business analysts searched for hidden investment opportunities in Maplewood. None of them guessed the truth. The most powerful woman in the room kept returning to a small town because of a man who never once asked for her last name. As spring slowly gave way to the first warm evenings of summer, Victoria realized something she had not expected and could no longer deny. She was no longer looking forward to accidental meetings. She was quietly hoping for reasons to become part of Ethan and Lily's ordinary tomorrow. Summer arrived quietly, carrying longer evenings and the comforting scent of freshly cut grass through Maplewood's peaceful neighborhoods. For Lily, school was almost over, and every afternoon seemed filled with bicycles, sidewalk chalk, and melting ice cream. For Victoria, every free hour had become unexpectedly precious. She found herself measuring her calendar not by board meetings or investor calls, but by the moments she might spend with Ethan and his daughter. One Saturday morning, the community center organized a volunteer project to renovate the playground at the local park. Parents painted benches while children planted flowers around the walking paths. Ethan spent the morning repairing a weathered wooden bridge that connected two sections of the playground. His hands moved with practiced confidence, replacing cracked boards one by one. Lily carefully painted small butterflies on the fence nearby, her tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth in deep concentration. Victoria arrived wearing faded blue jeans, a baseball cap, and work gloves that had clearly never been used before. Ethan looked up with a quiet smile. I did not know corporate executives volunteered on weekends. Victoria laughed. I told my office I had an important community meeting. That was not entirely untrue. He handed her a paintbrush, then welcomed to the crew. Throughout the morning, Victoria worked beside families who had no idea who she really was. She listened as grandparents shared old stories, teenagers joked with one another, and young children proudly displayed paint-covered hands. It felt strangely unfamiliar and deeply comforting. There were no presentations, no negotiations, no security teams following a careful schedule. There were only ordinary people helping one another because they cared about where their children played. During lunch, everyone gathered beneath a large maple tree with homemade sandwiches and lemonade. Lily sat beside Victoria and carefully split her chocolate chip cookie into two uneven pieces. The bigger one is yours, Lily declared. Victoria smiled. Should not you keep the bigger half? Lily shook her head. Daddy says sharing means giving someone the better piece sometimes. Victoria glanced toward Ethan, who was helping an elderly volunteer unfold another picnic table. He had not heard the conversation, yet his values quietly echoed through every choice his daughter made. Later that afternoon, while Ethan packed away his tools, Lily wandered toward the swings with Victoria. The little girl pumped her legs higher and higher until the breeze carried loose strands of hair across her face. Can I ask you something? Lily said softly. Of course. Why do you always come back? Victoria paused before answering. Because I like spending time with you and your dad. Lily smiled as if the answer confirmed something she had already suspected. Daddy likes you too. Victoria felt her heart quicken. Did he tell you that? Lily giggled. Daddy does not say everything. Sometimes you have to watch instead. Before Victoria could respond, Ethan called from across the playground. Lily, we should head home before the rain starts. Dark clouds had quietly gathered beyond the trees, softening the bright afternoon sky into shades of silver and blue. As the first cool breeze drifted across the park, Victoria helped Lily climb down from the swing. For just a brief moment, the three of them walked side by side toward the parking lot, looking less like acquaintances and more like a family no one had expected to see. Watching them disappear down the quiet street, several volunteers smiled without knowing why. None of them realized that the smallest member of that little group had already begun seeing something neither adult was ready to admit. Long before either Ethan or Victoria trusted their own hearts, Lily had quietly started making room for both of them inside hers. By early July, the quiet rhythm that had drawn Victoria into Ethan's world had become the one place where she felt she could finally breathe. Yet the closer she came to the life he had built, the more she sensed an invisible door that remained gently but firmly closed. Ethan welcomed her kindness, appreciated her company, and trusted her around Lily, but there was always a respectful distance he never crossed. One warm Friday evening, Maplewood hosted its annual summer concert on the green. Families spread blankets across the park while children chased fireflies through the fading sunlight. The scent of grilled corn and fresh lemonade drifted through the air as a local band played familiar songs beneath strings of glowing lights. Ethan arrived, carrying a folding chair in one hand and a picnic basket in the other. Lily ran ahead toward the open lawn before stopping to wave excitedly. "Miss Victoria, over here." Victoria smiled as she joined them with a homemade peach pie balanced carefully in her hands. "I hope there is still room for dessert." "There is always room for dessert," Lily declared with complete confidence. They laughed together as the evening settled into an easy comfort that felt almost effortless. They shared sandwiches, applauded the young musicians, and watched children dance barefoot across the grass. More than once, neighbors smiled as they passed, quietly assuming Ethan and Victoria were already a couple. Neither of them corrected anyone. As twilight deepened, the band finished its final song, and families slowly began packing their blankets. Fireflies floated above the field like tiny lanterns while the first stars appeared overhead. Lily yawned, resting her head against Ethan's shoulder. "Daddy, can we stay 5 more minutes?" "5 minutes," he answered softly. Victoria watched the gentle exchange with a warmth she had not felt in years. In boardrooms, she was admired. In magazines, she was celebrated. But here, surrounded by ordinary families beneath a summer sky, she found herself longing for something astonishingly simple. A place to belong. After Lily wandered a few steps away to collect glowing bracelets from a volunteer booth, Victoria took a slow breath. Her heart beat faster than it had before any business presentation. "Ethan." "Yes." "May I ask you something honestly?" He looked at her with calm attention. "You always can." She hesitated for only a moment before speaking. "Have I done something that makes you keep your distance from me?" Ethan looked genuinely surprised. "No." "Then why do I always feel as though you stop one step before letting me into your life?" The evening breeze stirred the branches overhead, while distant laughter echoed across the park. Ethan remained quiet for several seconds, choosing his words with the same care he used when restoring fragile furniture. Because some doors should never be opened carelessly. Victoria searched his face, even when someone is willing to walk through them slowly. He smiled with quiet sadness, especially then. Before she could ask another question, Lily came running back holding 3 glow bracelets. She slipped one onto Ethan's wrist, one onto Victoria's, and wore the last one herself. "Now we match," she announced proudly. Ethan looked at the bright bracelet circling his wrist before meeting Victoria's eyes once more. For just an instant, something unspoken passed between them, gentle enough to be missed by anyone else. Victoria understood that his distance had never come from pride, fear, or judgment. It came from a promise rooted somewhere deep inside a heart that still carried someone it had loved long before she ever arrived. And although she did not yet know the story behind that promise, she quietly realized it was far stronger than any wall money, success, or determination could ever break. 2 weeks later, an elegant charity gala filled the grand ballroom of the Hayes Foundation overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above perfectly dressed guests while a string quartet played softly in the background. Business leaders, journalists, and philanthropists moved gracefully from one conversation to another, all hoping for a moment with Victoria Hayes. Ethan had accepted the invitation only because every dollar raised that evening would fund scholarships for children who had lost a parent. He had almost declined until Lily looked up from the invitation resting on the kitchen table and smiled. "Daddy, if they are helping kids like us, you should go." Now he stood near one of the tall windows, quietly uncomfortable among tailored tuxedos and designer gowns. He had borrowed his suit from an old friend, polished his shoes twice, and reminded himself that kindness looked the same no matter what room it entered. Across the ballroom, Victoria greeted investors with practiced confidence, but her attention kept drifting back toward Ethan. Every conversation felt unfinished, because the only opinion she truly cared about belonged to the quiet man, standing alone with a glass of sparkling water in his hand. Several executives noticed the direction of her gaze and exchanged curious smiles. One finally whispered, "Who is he?" Another shrugged, "No idea, but she has looked at him all night." Victoria finally excused herself and walked across the room. The conversations around them gradually softened as curious eyes followed her. She stopped only a few feet from Ethan, her voice calm but unmistakably sincere. "May we talk?" Ethan nodded. They stepped onto a quiet terrace, overlooking the river where the warm summer breeze carried the distant sounds of boats moving through the harbor. City lights reflected across the water like scattered pieces of gold. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Victoria finally broke the silence. "I am tired of pretending I do not know what I feel." Ethan listened without interrupting. "I've spent my entire life making difficult decisions without fear," she continued softly. "But somehow standing here with you feels harder than every boardroom I have ever entered." She looked directly into his eyes. "I care about you, Ethan. More than I plan to. More than I know how to ignore." Ethan closed his eyes briefly before taking a slow breath. "Victoria, please do not answer because of my company, my reputation, or my money. Those things disappear the moment I am with you." His expression filled with quiet sorrow. "Those things were never the reason." She searched his face, her voice almost breaking. "Then tell me the real reason." Ethan reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and carefully unfolded a small piece of paper that had been creased from years of being carried close to his heart. The edges had faded, but the handwriting remained clear. "My wife wrote this during her final week in the hospital." Victoria remained silent as he gently read the words aloud. "If life gives you another chance to love, do not be afraid to take it. But promise me one thing. Do not choose a woman because she heals your loneliness. Choose the woman who will love Lily even when you are not in the room." His voice grew softer with every sentence. "I promised her I would never let anyone into our lives until I knew my daughter would never wonder where she belonged." Victoria felt tears gather before she even realized she was crying. For the first time, she understood that she had never been competing with the memory of another woman. She had been standing before a father who believed that protecting his daughter's heart was the greatest promise he would ever keep. When the gala ended that night, Victoria did not ask Ethan another question. She did not argue with his promise, and she did not try to convince him that her feelings were enough. Instead, she folded the copy of his late wife's handwritten note that he had allowed her to read one final time and quietly handed it back. "Thank you," she whispered, "not for answering me, for trusting me with something so precious." Ethan nodded gently, unable to find words that felt worthy of the moment. As Victoria walked toward her waiting car, the city lights reflected across the river. But for the first time in years, she was not thinking about tomorrow's meetings or the headlines that would greet her in the morning. She was thinking about one little girl who had unknowingly become the center of a father's entire world. The following weeks brought an unexpected change. Victoria stopped arranging accidental meetings with Ethan. She no longer visited his workshop, looking for reasons to stay a little longer. She no longer searched for opportunities to be alone with him. Instead, she quietly focused on the one person whose trust had to be earned naturally. On the first Saturday in August, Lily attended a community art class at the local library. When Ethan arrived to pick her up after finishing an installation across town, he was surprised to see Victoria sitting beside several children, carefully helping them decorate small wooden birdhouses with bright paint. Her expensive watch was gone. There was blue paint on her fingertips and a tiny streak of yellow across her sleeve. Lily proudly held up her birdhouse. "Look, Daddy. Miss Victoria, let me paint the roof purple because birds deserve happy colors too." Ethan smiled. "I think the birds will agree." Victoria simply returned the paintbrush to the table without trying to explain why she had volunteered every Saturday since the gala. A week later, Lily invited Victoria to watch her youth soccer game. Victoria arrived carrying nothing except a folding chair and a bottle of water. She cheered for every child equally, applauded every effort, and laughed whenever the players accidentally chased the referee instead of the ball. After the game, while other parents hurried home, She stayed behind to help gather scattered cones and fold portable goals without anyone asking. Ethan watched, quietly from across the field. She was not trying to impress him anymore. She was simply present. Autumn slowly replaced summer. Crisp mornings filled Maplewood with golden leaves drifting across sidewalks and cool breezes carrying the scent of apples and cinnamon. Victoria became part of ordinary moments rather than memorable events. She helped Lily practice multiplication tables after school, attended the school book fair, baked slightly uneven pumpkin muffins that made Lily laugh, and learned how to braid hair after several clumsy attempts that ended with both of them smiling. Never once did she mention her company, her achievements, or the life waiting for her in Manhattan. One rainy afternoon, Lily sat beside Victoria on the front porch while Ethan finished repairing a neighbor's rocking chair inside the workshop. The rain tapped softly against the roof as they watched puddles form across the driveway. Lily leaned her head gently against Victoria's shoulder. "Can I tell you a secret?" "Victoria smiled. "Secrets are safe with me." Lily looked toward the workshop where Ethan was still working. "Daddy smiles more now." Victoria felt her heart tighten. "That makes me happy." Lily was quiet for another moment before speaking so softly that the rain almost carried the words away. "I still miss my mommy every day." Victoria slipped her hand gently over Lily's without saying anything. After a long silence, Lily looked up with eyes full of quiet honesty. "I think she would like you too." Victoria blinked away unexpected tears as the little girl gave her hand a gentle squeeze. In that simple moment, without promises, without grand speeches, and without asking for anything in return, Victoria realized that the first heart she had truly begun to heal was never Ethan's. It was Lily's. The first snow of December arrived quietly, covering Maplewood with a blanket of white that softened every rooftop, every sidewalk, and every hurried thought. Nearly a year had passed since Victoria first opened a storybook beside a little girl waiting after school. The seasons had changed, but the smallest moments remained the ones that mattered most. Lily now raced through the front door of the workshop every Friday afternoon, carrying another library book she wanted to read with Victoria. Ethan watched them from across the room as they laughed over crooked snowmen, impossible fairy tales, and recipes that never turned out exactly as planned. Nothing about their life had become extraordinary. That was precisely what made it beautiful. One Saturday morning, Lily asked if they could visit the town's annual winter festival. The town square glowed beneath thousands of white lights while families gathered around hot chocolate stands and children skated carefully across a temporary ice rink. Christmas music drifted gently through the crisp afternoon air. Victoria arrived wearing a simple wool coat and a knitted scarf Lily had insisted on giving her as an early Christmas present. Ethan noticed that she wore it with obvious pride. They wandered through the festival together, stopping to admire handmade ornaments and wooden toys crafted by local artists. As dusk settled over the square, Lily tugged gently on Ethan's sleeve. "Daddy, can we go see the big tree?" He smiled. "Lead the way." The enormous evergreen stood at the center of the park, its branches sparkling beneath thousands of tiny lights. Families gathered nearby, taking photographs while children pointed excitedly toward the glowing star at the top. Lily suddenly looked from Ethan to Victoria with the thoughtful expression she always wore before asking an important question. "Can you both wait here for 1 minute?" Before either adult could answer, she hurried toward the small memorial garden beside the tree, where a quiet stone bench overlooked the frozen pond. Ethan and Victoria followed more slowly. Lily stopped beside the bench and looked up at her father. "Mommy always said Christmas is when people tell the truth." Ethan nodded softly. She did. Lily reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something at school." She handed it to Ethan. He unfolded the page carefully. In careful second-grade handwriting, it read, "Dear Santa, I already have everything I need except one thing. Daddy smiles when Miss Victoria is with us, and Miss Victoria smiles when Daddy is not looking. If you can, please make them stop being afraid." Ethan lowered the paper slowly as emotion filled his eyes. Victoria quietly looked away, giving him the privacy of his thoughts. The snow continued falling in slow, peaceful silence. Ethan reached into the inside pocket of his coat and gently touched the folded letter he had carried every day since his wife had written it years before. He read the familiar words one last time, then looked toward Lily laughing as she tried to catch snowflakes on her mitten. Finally, he turned to Victoria. "There is something I should have asked a long time ago." She met his eyes, her heart suddenly racing. Ethan smiled with the quiet peace that had always defined him. "I told you I could not choose someone simply because she healed my loneliness." He glanced toward Lily before looking back at Victoria. "You never tried to replace what we lost. You simply gave us something new to protect." He took a slow breath. "I was never protecting my own heart. I was protecting hers." Victoria's eyes filled with tears as Ethan gently held out his hand. "Would you go on a date with me?" She laughed through those tears, placing her hand in his without hesitation. "I've been waiting a very long time to say yes." Lily spun around just in time to see their hands together. She ran toward them, wrapping her arms around both of them at once as the church bells echoed across the snowy town square. No reporters captured the moment. No headlines announced it the next morning. There were no cameras, no applause, and no grand celebration. Only a father who had kept his promise, a woman who had earned love through patience instead of persuasion, and a little girl who finally saw the two people she loved most standing together beneath the quiet glow of Christmas lights, proving that the greatest miracles rarely arrive with noise. They arrive with dignity, grace, and hearts that choose one another when the time is finally right.